name's Nigel Taylor-Jones, and I am the collections team leader here at the Museum of Gloucester. I wasn't born in Gloucester, but I moved here when I was about 7, and both my parents come from Gloucester, and so I've always had a very keen interest in the history and the culture of this great city and its surrounding area. And in fact, when I was a schoolboy, I used to come to the museum on field trips, principally to look at the geology collections here. And that really sort of sparked my interest in the building, but I didn't really specifically plan to work here. It just sort of happened a number of years later. I've fulfilled a number of roles whilst I've been working at the museum. Started out as an attendant at the museum. I hate that word, attendant. It sounds like somebody who sits in a lavatory. But it evolved from there, and it was very much a role which you could make of it really what you wanted to. And the more interested you were in the collections here, the more involved I became in the work in the museum. And now I'm in this fabulous role of collections team leader, and I get to sort of indulge my interest big time. So it's a different role for me. It's a new role for me. I'm now no longer so much focused on front of house matters, but I'm working behind the scenes, caring for and conserving the collections, making sure that they're properly stored, and making sure they're properly handled, catalogued. We're embarking on a massive project to decant part of the museum collections from the Life Museum to the Museum of Gloucester, which is an enormous project that is scheduled to last for around 5 years. And I always regard it as a massive privilege to be working in such an interesting sector, and it's something that I never take for granted. Having been here for 31 years now, obviously I've collected a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about the items that we have in our collection, and also about the history of Gloucester as well. But it's not something that I ever take for granted, and I think the thing to remember is that I'm always learning. Every day I come into work, there's something new to be learnt. So it's not that you ever get to a point where you know everything. That's impossible. So yeah, I've always regarded that as a great privilege.
And I think you're absolutely right. The jobs that we do, we are in such a privileged position to be able to work with collections. I don't know, they could just be a couple of years old, or they could be thousands, almost millions of years old. But the privileged position we find ourselves in as museum staff, yourself more on the curatorial side and myself on the marketing and events side, being able to promote this wonderful building and collection. I feel like we have to pinch ourselves sometimes. We are working in perhaps our dream jobs, perhaps. So good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Washington, Events and Marketing Officer here at the Museum of Gloucester. It's been my absolute privilege to work with Nigel and the rest of the team for a couple of years now at the Museum of Gloucester. And no more has it been sort of more interesting and special than over this period of lockdown, whereby we've had to almost turn everything that we do on its head, really. But as Nigel says, we have such an interesting and incredible team of people, such incredible knowledge. I'm fortunate to be able to, I'm not actually in the museum at the moment. We're working from home on this side of things, but that when we are in the buildings, I don't know, Nigel, how you feel, but I walk through the archaeology room and there's a medieval pot on the right hand side, there's a medieval tile or Anglo-Saxon. It just blows my mind. I've always loved museums, and I've always wanted to work in a museum. And yeah, since a child, just being able to go to museums and art galleries, it's a wonderful place to be in. And I hope that other people feel that too about, coming to a museum, and that it's a place of rest and relaxation, but also learning. And anyway, you can tell that we really love it. So we hope that our audience and our visitors feel the same as well. Our talk today is really about all of the work we did over lockdown, and we did a lot, but what we'd like to focus on today is talking about our virtual tours that we did, and also the digital engagement, some work on an exhibition, the future holds for digital and virtual, and the Museum of Gloucester itself. So Nigel, I wonder if you can cast your mind back to March 2020, only about 6 months ago. Feels like another lifetime ago. Think what's happened in the period. Where did we find ourselves at the museum back in March?
Well, I think like most people around the country, we were suddenly in this situation where lockdown was thrust upon us. A few months prior to that, if people had said to you we weren't going to be able to come to work and everything was going to be closed down, we wouldn't have believed it. And developing a virtual museum with digital content was something that we've always, or something that I've always had in the back of my mind, something that we should be doing. But it's one of those things that it's an aspirational idea, but you never actually find the time to get around to doing it. But here we were in March, suddenly faced with closure, and it very quickly became apparent that unless we did something to put the collections out into the public view and to keep the idea and the memory of the museum, if you like, alive in the big wide world, we could find ourselves disappearing off a cliff of obscurity.
Absolutely.
And so when people came back after lockdown finished, they wouldn't even remember that we had a museum. So it was really, really important to keep the museum alive, albeit in a virtual way. So we didn't really have much time to prepare. I didn't really have much time to prepare. But what we decided that we were going to do was to or what I was going to do was produce a series of video tours of the museum itself, on a sort of a theme by theme basis, and also talk about some of the key individual items that are in the collections, of which we have many, many special examples. And it evolved from there, really. But as well as the collections, of course, the museum is more than that. We have a very active, or had a very active, engagement and activity program, and so some of those workshops and activities that we would have normally conducted in normal times, we decided that we were going to put that on a virtual platform as well, so that people could have something to occupy themselves at home whilst they're twiddling their thumbs, wondering when life is going to get back to normal.
Absolutely. I remember asking you, well, I think I can remember the phone call was, Nigel, will you be going to the museum regularly to check? Obviously, the fish was my first priority. We have, is it 5 fish at the museum?
5 currently, yeah.
And then obviously to check on building security and safety, of course. But it occurred to us, didn't it, that actually this was a wonderful opportunity to take images and videos and describe the museum's collection and the building itself, and actually make sure that the public had something to engage with. With parents, we've had children at home, we've wanted to, educate, and many other parents felt the same. They wanted to have engagement resources to educate their children, but not just that, for other audiences to be able to see what the museum had to offer. And she quite rightly said, don't want the museum going off the map. With the building may be shut, but the collection and the staff are working very, very hard behind the scenes. And I imagine for some people it was perhaps the first time they were aware of the Museum of Gloucester or the museum's collection, and only have ever visited us virtually.
That's very true. Gloucester's got a population of about 120,000, but not all of those 120,000 people have been into the museum, sadly. So yeah, it's a really good way of advertising and marketing, and just getting all the wonderful stories out into the public domain that we have attached to the objects that we have within the building.
So for anybody that's not seen our virtual tours of the virtual Museum of Gloucester, quite a lot of virtuals there, everything is available on our YouTube channel, our website and our Facebook page. And we're also going to try throughout this video to show some examples of the areas and the items we focused on. But I wonder if we could go back first of all to how we did it. Nigel, did we equip you with a state-of-the-art camera crew and presenters and a full editing suite, or did we basically say, take your smartphone and off you go?
It would have been nice, wouldn't it, to have had all the high-tech equipment, but no, it was anything but. Fortunately, about 3-4 months before lockdown hit, I just changed my smartphone. Not it's not really a top of the range phone by any means. It's a Samsung A4, but what it does have is a really good camera. So it enabled me to do some video filming. I did have a problem with how I was actually going to send the files once they were actually filmed, because I tried sending it as a normal email attachment, and of course the file sizes are too big, so that didn't work. But I think it was you, Amy, that introduced me to the concept of Google Drive, which was a revelation.
Yes, thank goodness for cloud storage. We were able to transfer from your phone all of the content and all of the copy seamlessly. So yes, that was a learning curve for all of us there, having never really worked remotely like that before.
Yeah, so it just took a little while to sort of get my head around how to convert from the original video film stored on my smartphone into a Google Drive file, and then attach that Google Drive file to an email. But once I'd done that, it was a relatively straightforward process. So off I went, indulging myself, filming everything and anything that I could think of. I tried to begin with a logical timeline. So I started with topics around prehistory, and then moved through various periods like the Ice Age, and then into the Romans, and from Romans to Anglo-Saxons to medieval, etc., etc. But as I went, it was obvious that there were some very, very important objects which warranted their own little video films. And so that's the sort of methodology that I used. But also the building itself is a unique asset, and it has lots of interesting and unique features, such as the Roman wall itself. The museum's actually built on top of the Roman wall. Part of the basement of the building has also been used as an air raid shelter in World War II, and the actual signage that says it's an air raid shelter is still there.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And people don't often get to see that unless they take one of your incredible behind the scenes tours, which hopefully will start up again.
Yeah,
in,
I mean,
normal times.
Absolutely, it'd be great to go back to doing people again. And of course, I'm very used to giving tours to groups of people and speaking to groups of people, and I very quickly discovered that it's a very different medium, a very different skill, talking to a camera. And I actually felt initially quite self-conscious, which is a weird thing, but
that's interesting, isn't it? Almost like the camera is your audience, and then your audience is beyond the camera. But once you've got to get your head around that first, I suppose, and it's a different mindset.
I think that it sort of became a lot easier for me when I realised that I didn't have to rush it. It was important to slow down, think about what I was saying, and not worry about making mistakes, because if you make a mistake, you just erase it and start again. So it doesn't really matter how many takes you have. You can just keep going until you get it right. But once I sort of mastered the general sort of technique, I got to a point where a lot of the recordings were done in one take. Not all of them, but a few of them were just done in one take, and so it becomes much easier. But it is a difficult and sometimes daunting skill when you embark on something like this to begin with.
No, I mean, we asked a lot of you. I mean, you're incredibly experienced at giving tours, like you said, to groups of people, and it's a good point to say that the Museum of Gloucester offers many tours, often of our incredible Eastgate chamber, which houses part of the original Roman wall, and actually now almost provides the foundation for the building sitting above it. I think that's fair to say, isn't it? Boots is built on Roman wall foundations. They're so strong, almost 2,000 years later. And you are one of our incredible facilitators who will do that as a Roman soldier or a medieval mercenary. So you're very used to doing that to crowds of people, from school children to adults. But yeah, this is a totally new medium for the museum, and everything we did, that first video, I believe, was the prehistory area of the museum, because like you said, you did that logically. It was just an incredible test to see were people going to view the content? Were people going to comment on what we've done? And was there going to be general public engagement? And I'm really, really pleased to say that appetite for content and everything we were doing was rather gratefully received by people.
Yeah, I think that was, in hindsight, that was exactly the right thing to do, to start with prehistory and stroke dinosaurs, because that really sort of struck a chord with the general public. I mean, there's always a lot of interest in dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And I think that was possibly one of the most viewed of the video clips that I did. And because it was a very popular subject right at the very start, I think a lot of people then naturally wanted to see the next one and then the next one, and it went on from there.
Yeah. And I liked the way you did it actually as a time frame, because that gave an order, and we didn't necessarily want to make it too structured and too rigid, because I think that way your natural personality comes out. The way you're doing it's nice and relaxed. The audience can hopefully see that you're not doing anything forced. You know, the fact you did most of them in one take was incredible, and in the spirit of this, we should say we're trying to do this talk in as little takes as possible. Not sure with that, but hopefully also we'll, at the end of this recording, maybe show some excerpts from some of your talks, not necessarily the outtakes, although I'd love to know if there's a bloopers reel somewhere.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, but I, having seen some of them for a second time, I am aware of a few slight errors. Nothing too major, but it does make me think that possibly in the future I might go back and sort of redo a few of them just to improve on them. But that's a sort of a small issue, really.
I mean, I think as long as you, we're always learning, aren't we? We're always looking to do things differently, and we're going to hopefully actually re-release these tours, I should say. In fact, I think I made you get up to 40, didn't I? So we had the top 40, so hopefully we can steal a bit of that branding to publicise a few more of them. But I guess there's scope for further videos on more of our collection, because could you just remind me again how many items are in the collection and what percentage or roughly how many we've got on display?
It's very roughly around about 730,000 objects.
Wow.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
And probably only a few thousand of those are actually on display. But like most museums, what you see when you come in through the doors, when you can come in through the doors, is only the tip of the iceberg. The limiting factor, of course, is space. The museum is quite large, but it's never large enough. So we just simply don't have the room to have all the objects on display. So there is very, very much more behind the scenes. But one of the things we're going to try and do in the future is make those collection items that are not visible more accessible by a combination of improving storage facilities, recruiting a new team of volunteers, and generally making the collections more accessible for people to view and to use for research.
Which is such a wonderful idea, because we're getting new acquisitions as well as looking after our existing collection. I know we recently acquired a helmet from our friends at the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps NATO base in Gloucester, which perhaps you could touch on in a moment. But to make collections that don't get out on display available, engage with the public, schools, anyone who shares an interest, and display new acquisitions, I think is incredibly important. We're currently looking at a contemporary collecting project for lockdown, which we'll touch on in a minute as well. But I imagine everyone feels it's incredibly important to keep collecting and acquiring, and making everything accessible.
Well, I mean, that's key for any museum. I think any museum that thinks that it shouldn't be collecting items from the present is not going to be around in the future. And so it's important to us that we're not just focusing on what's happened in the past. We're also collecting items from the present with a view to what we do, because it is a continually evolving process. And a lot of the objects that we've got in the collections currently, by recording them virtually and putting them out into a vast new market of internet viewers, is a great way of raising interest in the museum and attracting community engagement. And some of the
Definitely.
films that I recently recorded have been seen by people in local communities in Gloucester, and there've been some really beneficial spin-offs from that.
Yes.
One of which is the Imjin Barracks project. Only yesterday received this. This is the Imjin magazine, which is distributed to everybody in the ARRC. Now, if anybody doesn't know what the ARRC is, it's the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, and it's the rapid reaction force that NATO uses to react to crises around the world. And their main headquarters is in Imjin Barracks in Gloucester. And so there's many thousands of people associated with that. And partly as a result of one of the video clips that I put out into the community, the people at Imjin Barracks got really interested in Roman history, and as a consequence visited the museum under social distancing restrictions, of course.
Of course.
And very kindly donated a helmet to the museum, which we now have in our collections, a modern Italian battle helmet from the 21st century.
Wow.
And obviously, when you think about it, in 500 years' time, that object will be on display somewhere in the museum.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine the sort of interest that there'll be about that object in 500 years.
Yeah, and you've told the story behind it as to how we came about to acquire it. You know, we are incredibly fortunate to have in Gloucester and Gloucestershire incredible businesses and organisations such as ARC, and to have those relationships with people who want to engage with the museum to not only donate but to come and find out more about the collections, and not just that, but Gloucester from its origins as a, well, possibly pre-Roman, but certainly a Roman colonia. The Italian general at ARC was incredibly interested to come and look. If you could just remind me, was it the cheek plate from a helmet that started this off?
Yeah, well, I think actually it was, as much as anything, it was the video about the Rufusita tombstone, because the point of the story is that the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps is a multinational force. It's made up of people from all over the world. And it was a very similar situation 2,000 years ago when the Roman military arrived in Gloucester. Although the core of the legion was made up of people from what we now call modern day Italy, the Roman army drew people from all over the empire, recruited into the legions for their particular fighting skills. And Rufusita was a Thracian, so he came from modern day Bulgaria.
Oh, okay.
And he sadly died when he was stationed here at Gloucester,
Gosh.
along with many others as well. And a lot of their tombstones are on display in the museum collections. And when the commanding officer of ARC saw this video, I think that sort of sparked his interest in coming to the museum and establishing the links that we now have with that organisation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good example of how digital content can create community engagement opportunities.
Absolutely. It's been a really wonderful piece of work and a partnership, and amongst many partnerships we've got with, we're very lucky with other heritage organisations around the city of Gloucester, such as the cathedral, other priories. It's just, you know, a wonderful chance to be able to share. We keep saying accessible, don't we? But I think at the moment with COVID, and we are recording this as we're in our second lockdown, we're very conscious that our audience can't engage with us in our museum building. We must say that we were open between the 2nd of September till the 4th of November. And I think we were quite delighted to see people coming back into the museum, and certainly families over half term. We ran Halloween trails, but whether we can do that again for our public, or whether we need to think of more virtual engagement going forward. Certainly when we've spoken to schools, I know there's great appetite for digital engagement. I like to think, and I think as you touched on in the beginning as well, it's not just what we have to do when we're locked down, it's actually, it forms part of our public programme and education programme going forwards. It's a lovely medium to work in.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky to have people like yourself who'll go and actually do the filming, but then we also have very talented people within the team, such as our social media expert, who was posting a lot of these videos online and, you know, helping manage the public perception. You know, we even sort of like talked about when we were putting them out, you know, what time should we put them out, what time is it? In the end, 8 o'clock in the evening seemed like a really good time. So we had lots of learning from the marketing side of things as well, which was really enjoyable, and I feel like we've got some good data now to help us continue with it, really.
Very much so. I mean, I freely admit I'm a technological dinosaur, really. I can do the filming, and I have the knowledge to be able to impart that to the public. But I have no knowledge, particularly of Facebook or social media platforms, all that sort of thing. So I rely on the events and marketing team to do that sort of side of things for me. So it is very much a cooperative effort. It's like all things in a museum environment. It's never usually one person that does anything. It's always a team effort.
And I think what we're discovering, actually, we're currently doing our museum development plan, which should hopefully see us putting some plans together for the next 5 years. And the team that are currently involved in that are from collections, projects, engagement and marketing. And I think it's fair to say that we're actually really enjoying the process and working quite well as a team together, because everyone's bringing their own set of skills, some of them crossing over. I think you've learnt loads more about, you know, how social media works, and I've learnt lots more about collections and history since I've been working at the museum, and I'm always keen to learn more. And the fact that we're all sort of sharing some of those skills with each other, but somebody's the expert in each field, and I guess collections, you could say, as a product that we can promote for you, and we want to do everything we can to get that message out there, that we have a great city, a great history, a great collection, a great museum, and also a great team of people who, you know, through what has been an incredibly challenging, unprecedented time for everybody, everyone's worked so hard, and been so game to do stuff and everything, even though it's been difficult times for everybody.
I think that's the thing about the lockdown is, you know, we have considered virtual content in the past and developing a virtual museum, but it's forced us to evolve incredibly quickly, much quicker than I think we would have done if lockdown hadn't happened. And I'm sure the rest of the world is in a similar position. The concept of having team and Zoom meetings a year ago, it just wouldn't have entered my head. And yet here we are now, just a few months later, and now it's an everyday occurrence. So the world is evolving at an incredible rate. And part of that is reflected in the way the museum is conducting itself now, with developing a virtual museum and actively gathering digital collections and content.
And you know, I do miss that contact with the people when I'm doing work from home and I'm not actually in the museum, because sometimes the best conversations are those conversations when you might pass somebody in a corridor and you have a thought, or someone mentions something and then it sparks off that discussion. We're lucky enough, we had a meeting yesterday, didn't we, the team doing the plan about exhibitions and exhibition themes and what do we do on our public and engagement and education programme going forwards. And actually, considering that was online with some of us without our cameras on, because I have terrible internet connection here, and sometimes things just crash, don't they? It's just the way it is, or somebody's on mute. That's a great one, isn't it? But actually we're finding, and I'm not sure if I like the phrase a new normal, but that's what it is, and we're all finding a way to get through barriers, and we're not seeing them as barriers, we're saying how can we overcome that, I think. I mean, I think the way I would describe it is, we had a normal channel, didn't we, about a year ago, and now all of a sudden, because of the pandemic, a branch has split away and has become a virtual branch, a digital branch, and we still have the normal branch, although we're not able to go down that path at the moment because of the lockdown. But I anticipate in the future those two branches are running parallel to one another, and they rely on one another, and they now exist and are two different entities but inextricably linked. Absolutely.
And I think, but for lockdown, that second virtual path would have been much slower to actually get going. here we are now, and it exists.
Yeah. And actually, it's quite nice to have a conversation virtually. I mean, I don't think you have too far to come into work, but for anybody that travels further than half an hour, perhaps they get a bit of extra time in their day. It doesn't, make up for not being able to kind of see your colleagues, but it's lovely that we have this technology available to us. And I was thinking the other day, what if this has happened even 10 years ago? Would it have been possible to have as many people working from home? And I think it's just making sure that staff are looked after, and we're very conscious that museum and cultural services in Gloucester, they are being well looked after and contributing and being able to enjoy. I think that's it. It's enjoyment of what we're putting on. We're not just doing this because we feel we have to. As I hope that you enjoyed doing all the tours, because we certainly enjoyed putting them on, and hope that the public did.
Yeah, I mean, the more I got into it, the more enjoyable it became. In fact, now that I've completed the 40 tours, I'm going to do some more.
New splash, you hear it here.
Well, I have sort of ideas about where I'd like to take it, and slightly different ways of approaching it, but I think the concept is a sound one. And obviously with 730,000 objects, there's no end of material.
Yes,
it's really just limited by time and the general interest in the public, which I'm sure is huge, and judging by the number of people that viewed them.
Definitely. And I think my first question is, how long do you think it'll take you to do all of those objects, or 700,000 first of all? Do you think maybe we can get them all done in a year? All right, 2 years. but certainly we should ask the public. We're doing an audience development survey at the moment, where we're going out and asking our audience what they think of the museum and what they'd like to see. I'd love to see us doing a bit more digital engagement and ask people what they'd like to see on your tours next too.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's what I found was, after the first half a dozen or so that were put out on social media platforms, I was actually getting comments back from people that I'm Facebook friends with, asking could they see a video on so and so. So it sort of became self-guiding almost, which is really interesting. And obviously, the more people you reach, the more ideas you get back. And technology generally gives you that extra dimension. It enables you to survey the community and find out what they're really interested in, so you can sort of really tailor it to their needs and their wishes, which is really exciting. Because it's harder to do that when you just got people coming through the door. It's harder to stop people and ask them to fill out a physical survey. But if they're giving you immediate and instant feedback electronically and virtually, then it's easier to react to, I think.
Absolutely. And we want to be ever changing and not redoing what we've done already, but maybe adding a different angle to it. We're all going to have constantly changing exhibitions at the museum, whether that be again online or within the museum. Lots of different objects, but lots of different ways to engage different groups, I would say, as well. And I just should say at this point that we're very lucky to have a couple of new team members join the museum recently. Our new collections officer, Lizzie, and our new engagement, Ashley, who joined the team very recently. And they are going to be incredible assets to the museum, being able to push, and share some of that workload and engage with the public. We've got lots of different ideas. We talked about potentially the costume store coming out from decanting the folk museum. We've already had a very talented lady who won an award, Navera Gilbert, make a replica of a morning dress, I believe. So it gives us lots of ideas to put on new exhibitions, create new content. And of course, if we're able to find time to research some of that, the list is endless. I've seen the most wonderful online games, jigsaws, videos. We talked yesterday about augmented reality. How can we make some of our paintings come alive? Because of course, don't forget the museum has a great art collection as well as an archaeological collection. So the list is endless.
You're absolutely right. Technology opens up a whole new world. One of the key objects we've got in the collections is the Gloucester Table Set, which is the world's oldest form of tables, which is an old game, very like backgammon. It's made from bone and antler, and technology potentially could enable us to recreate a Gloucester table set virtually, which you could play with.
That would be incredible.
So that would be really exciting.
Wow, just to bring that alive.
Just one example.
Yeah. Well, the mirror, the bird-lit mirror, I mean, that's one of my personal favourites. Just think what we could do with that.
Yeah, you could imagine somebody actually turning and manipulating a three-dimensional mirror and actually seeing their reflection in it, as the original owner of the mirror would have done, of course.
Yeah.
So there's a whole world of possibilities. And also, of course, it enables museums like ours to more easily access fundraising streams.
Yes.
Yes, there are benefits all round.
Because there's so many stories that can be told. I mean, just talking about a mirror being made into a virtual reality, I mean, it starts thinking about all those questions about who did that mirror belong to. We know that it was obviously found within a grave. That has been reconstructed. Was it 25 years ago now?
About 25 years ago, yeah.
So many different stories we can tell, you know. I think that's what's so fascinating about history for a lot of people is what's the social element to it? Who was that person?
Whoever she was somebody incredibly important.
Yeah.
It's even, I think, fancifully been suggested that she was Queen Boudicca or Boudica. I think that's very, very fanciful. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. But whoever she was obviously somebody of great importance.
Yeah.
And as an object, it's probably the finest piece of Celtic artwork anywhere in Britain. So it's a really, really key treasure.
We're so fortunate to have it, and every time I walk into the museum, I do stop for a couple of minutes and I look at that. I don't ignore the other parts of our collection, because every time I'm in the museum I see more things, and I hope that's what the public see when they look at your digital videos and when they come into the museum when they can as well, is that there's endless things to look at on one object that you might have looked at 50 times already, and then endless stories that come out of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many treasures. We could be here for hours talking about them.
We probably shouldn't. We'll have to record a series of these.
Yeah. A couple of other things I'd like to mention is that,
Sure.
you know, the digital engagement side of things. We talked about the helmet from the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, but there's been other beneficial spin-offs as well. Somebody who runs the Catch a Smile charity in Gloucester, which is aimed at disabled and disadvantaged children, saw one of the videos and requested whether we have museum collections in terms of old props for exhibitions that we no longer need. Did we have anything in it along a dinosaur theme?
Wow.
And so after a while I sort of stopped and thought about it and thought, well, actually, yeah, we do have a few things that we're not going to need again because they're too old or they're not in good enough condition. So I was able to see an opportunity there to help out a local community group and also create a bit of space in the museum, which then helps us and makes it a little bit easier to display some of the other treasures that we have.
And what a wonderful way of helping the community. That's just fantastic. A fantastic story.
So it's just a really good example of how digital content can create really beneficial spin-offs.
Absolutely. And one thing we probably need to say is that when we try and do this again, is that hopefully we'll have a little bit more kit to do it next time, is that we'd like to try and perhaps go back, well, previous videos and future videos. Maybe we'll add some captions or some subtitles, or we'll make them so that other people can see them in other mediums, because we're quite aware that not everybody obviously has access to phones or laptops. Maybe we need to display them somewhere else and display them with closed captions, just to be able to help people who may be hearing impaired, or that, you know, we can talk through them to anyone who's visually impaired in the future. So we're quite looking forward to doing that, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the videos I did, I was filming them myself, so I was holding my smartphone and filming the displays or the object in question. But it would be really nice, I think, in the future if we could do it slightly differently and have somebody actually doing the filming of me presenting the objects. Or it doesn't have to be me, it could be somebody else.
No, you've signed yourself up. I'm sorry. It's on camera now. No, I love that too.
But I think that would then give it an extra dimension, because you'd be doing or fulfilling the role of a presenter, which is more often what you see when you're watching television programs.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to do that when you're holding a smartphone. I did sort of experiment with filming in mirrors and things like that so that you could see my reflection in it, but it didn't quite work.
I thought they worked really well, but I love the idea of you being actually the presenter or somebody else being the presenter at the same time. And I guess, you know, COVID restrictions made that impossible, but there's no reason going forwards we can't make that COVID safe if we get some more equipment and plan them in a different way. But one thing I would say is that I liked the fact that it was focused on the object, but to have you on screen talking, I think would just add an extra dimension too. Perhaps that leads us quite nicely on to, you know, some success stories or some learning points as to, you know, we were very lucky to get a case study published in the Museums Association Journal on our lockdown activities. And I know you shared with me then some, but I just wondered whether it'd be a good time to, you know, what was really good about it, but what, you know, what would you like to have done differently next time, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of having somebody else doing the filming, I think, is something I'd like to explore, and obviously some better equipment. Whilst my Samsung A4 was quite good as a learning process,
other smartphones are available.
Other smartphones are available, and much better equipment and sound recording available, which would give greater resolution to the film, and make it easier for people to see. Exploring different types of lighting as well, because parts of the museum for effect are quite dark, so that makes it quite difficult to get the lighting right. Particularly, I'm thinking particularly of basement areas where the Roman wall is. Sometimes that's quite nice to be dark. It's quite atmospheric, but you miss a lot of the detail as well. So there's all sorts of things from a technological point of view to consider to improve.
Yeah.
And lots of different objects in the collections. Of course, I would like to do other themes further as well. And yeah, I mean, I think the success of the films was clear to begin with because of the number of views that it suddenly generated. Part of me was amazed that there's so many people out there that want to watch them. And it became sort of self-sustaining, and all the spin-offs that we had from it with community groups. It's really a bit of an eye-opener to see, you know, the possibilities for the future. So it's really exciting. And it's not really 12 months ago. It's not really something I'd envisage doing at all. But it's definitely something that I want to explore more in the future.
No, I agree. And I think people from other venues in town have come to, or sorry, I should say the city, have come to, you know, inquire as to how we did these tours. And we belong to a group called the Gloucestershire Museums Group, and we're going to be giving a talk on this to our colleagues in the southwest on, I think it's the 17th of December. But of course, Nigel, I'm sure you won't mind if we put the details at the end of this talk as to how people can get in contact with us if they would like a bit more advice on how we did this, what our future plans are, and, you know, some of the learning points. You can also look at the case study on the Museums Association website, or we can send you a copy of that. This is probably also a very good time just to say about our other piece of activity during lockdown, which isn't necessarily a digital video, but it involves videos and digital images, is that the museum put out a call out in May to ask the public in Gloucestershire to share their memories of COVID-19 in Gloucestershire over the period of lockdown. And we said that was from March 2020, and we actually finished that collection in August. Now we're going to be doing another call out again for your images and videos from August onwards, and so if you can keep an eye on our website and our social media channels for more information there. But the whole reason for doing this collection was to make sure that we had a contemporary collection for our digital archives, and that anything we collected we could display as an exhibition in the museum. So when we do this, that date is still under discussion, but we are hoping to put that out as an online exhibition, sharing memories of lockdown with the public, not just in obviously Gloucestershire, but the world now, if it's available online. So that was a really interesting project, and the people of the county, or even people who'd visited and taken photographs in the county, really engaged. We had over 300 entries. I think as every single photograph just tells a wonderful story about lockdown. You know, from empty supermarket shelves to empty classrooms, and we really enjoy putting that project together as well. So there's lots of appetite for being involved digitally. We know there's lots of appetite for people to be involved in helping us curate and expand our collection. And we're hoping we can, you know, have that available on the museum's website very, very soon. And at some point when it's safe to again, have everybody back in the galleries. But I hope this augments our collection and augments the work we've been doing, that, you know, all of our lockdown activity was filled with, you know, getting and acquiring new items for the collection and engaging with people in a new format.
Yeah, and it's a really, really good way of museums evolving into this very important area of digital collecting. One of the key things that we're tasked with in the museums is contemporary and current collections, and developing a contemporary and current collections policy. And it's a really good way of involving the local community and getting those memories recorded and stored, and we can use that as a resource in the future, and it's part of the natural evolution of museums in the 21st century. Absolutely,
and we were so fortunate to have to be able to work with so many of our citywide partners, such as the archives and the libraries, and that our idea for the Life in Lockdown exhibition sparked off, you know, a city and county wide call for content, whether that be diaries, poems, written word, and that A Life in Lockdown became the umbrella term for the city's collections and collecting projects, which are still going on as they should do. So that's been really great for us to cement those relationships with our partners a little bit more.
And even within our own organisation, one of the things I've noticed is now that we're virtually much more active, although the museum is, of course, part of Gloucester City Council, because we don't work day to day with the majority of people who also work for Gloucester City Council, there's an element of remoteness. But now that we're involved in the virtual world and putting things out, I've noticed very much more so that people are now getting to know me personally much better.
Yes.
And so it's really sort of putting the museum on the internal Gloucester City Council map, which is, I think, really, really important, because we are an important and integral part of the council. And so it's really helping with that sort of system of internal communication.
Oh, definitely. And people have been very supportive. We've got our internal channels, and that, yes, the museum is part of that wider council, as you say, and we're not just part of the council, we're also part of a cultural service within the city, which includes our live music venue, Gloucester Guildhall, which I'm just going to do a shameless plug here, won a local award for being best live music venue in Gloucestershire, which was fantastic, and we're really, really delighted for them. Plus we also have Blackfriars, sorry, I say that properly, not Black, I knew I'd get it wrong, Blackfriars Priory. That's going with their English heritage, that's part of the site as well. And so the museum is the museum building, it is the virtual museum, but it also exists in other sites. And as our wonderful city archaeologist Andrew Armstrong would say, is that, you know, there's scope for our collection to be perhaps back at the sites that they were discovered from, being the county museum. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we take all the depositions from digs around the county and other sites that we can share everything back with the location it was found. So we are one big team, we are one big city, and I think we work very well that way.
Definitely.
Okay, so I think that just really leads us to say that we've had a great time over lockdown. We've had challenges, but I think we've absolutely seen the positives in every way. We've got future plans, more tours, we're putting out tours, lots of exciting things happening with development plans, audience surveys. I feel that we're at the beginning, and I hate the word journey, but I'm going to use it because it feels like it is a journey that we're just going.
Yeah, I think it is a journey, very much
so, onwards and upwards, really, and new ideas, and I think other people's ideas are always gratefully received as well. We want the public and anybody who's hopefully watching this, I hope we get a couple of people watching it, certainly I know my mum will watch it, and hopefully a few other people, just to say, you know, what you want from the museum. We firmly believe your museum, your Museum of Gloucester for your city, and just we want to be able to share everything we can do with the public, really.
Yeah, I suppose it's the old saying, isn't it? You've got to use the facility, otherwise, you use it. If you don't use it, then the consequences long term can be severe. But I think having a virtual content, a virtual program, makes it a lot easier for people to use it.
Definitely. I think it would break my heart to think that some people didn't think that museums or this museum were for them, because I'd like to think there's something in every collection and every story that can resonate in a city that's over 2,000 years old and has been for so many years and still is now multicultural, and very much alive as it was, when the Romans or Iron Age people were here beforehand. So
yeah. It always has been and always will be very multicultural,
which we want to celebrate. So I think that just really leads us to conclude. Thank you so much, Nigel, for taking the time out. I must, if you don't mind, just comment on your incredible attire that you're wearing. Is this a legally bound agreement between yourself and the museum to only wear clothes from a certain period?
Well, it's not authentic. It just seemed appropriate to wear something historical when we're talking about recording films of the history of Gloucester. It's an Edward III type period costume. Might have been worn by somebody like the Black Prince, who was Edward III's son, mid 14th century. But it's not authentic. It's just a bit of historical fun.
No, I love it. I just like to point out that I wasn't provided with any historical outfit. And so that has been noted. And the Black Prince, am I right, is buried in Gloucester Cathedral? Is that right?
That's Edward II.
Oh, so close.
Yeah.
I knew. This is why you're here, Nigel, to do all the historical stuff, and I bow to history on there. But no, I just want to say thank you very, very much for taking the time to have this conversation today, and I hope it's the start of many others.
You're very welcome, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope to be virtually recording for many years to come.
Yes, myself too. So on that note, we'll say goodbye, everybody, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for watching. Like I say, hopefully the first of many talks from the Virtual Museum of Gloucester. Thank you, everybody.
Real history is not about a list of dates or events, but it's about the actual people who lived through it. And here at the Museum of Gloucester, we have some fabulous Roman tombstones from the very early days of Roman occupation of Britain in the 1st century AD. The tombstone on the left belongs to a gentleman called Rufus Seater, and it's world famous, partly because it's in such good condition, but also it gives a wonderful insight into the characters that would have been around in Gloucester in the 1st century AD. Now, Rufus was an auxiliary cavalryman. He originated from Thrace, which is today in modern-day Bulgaria and parts of Greece. And in the 1st century AD, he was stationed in Gloucester as a detachment of cavalry from the 20th Legion. And Rufus was a member of the 6th cohort of that legion, and he completed 22 years of service, which was really unfortunate for him because he was only 3 years away from full retirement, but sadly died here at Gloucester, and this is the tombstone that marked his grave site. If we look at the lower part of the tombstone, you can clearly see the Latin inscription, which gives all the relevant details of his life, but also emotively you can see that on horseback he is trampling on his Celtic enemy beneath him. Rufus was 40 when he died, and he was buried at Wootton Pitch, which is near to where St Catherine's Church is today. And his tombstone is one of our greatest treasures here at the Museum of Gloucester. And it's really historically significant because it does show that even in the 1st century AD, there were people migrating to Britain from faraway countries. And it's possible that Rufus would have looked something like this, like the gentleman on horseback. Real people, real history. Thank you for watching this video clip, part of a series of video clips from the Virtual Museum of Gloucester.